It's shocking. Really, a game with an overlong, seemingly troubled development cycle being primarily developed by a team with practically zero pedigree within the genre. Hell, within the non-mobile gaming space as a whole. I mean, yeah, Platinum Games were the ones who developed the combat and then left, or something like that, but the unproven Osaka Sai games are the ones leading the charge on the game. With a background like that, what kind of product would you expect to be pulled out of the oven? Mediocre? Bad? So imagine my surprise to find that Granblue Fantasy Relink is actually pretty awesome. It's not perfect, it's got its fair share of rough edges begging to be polished, but it's fun, it's engrossing, it's charming, and perhaps above all, it's powerful, full to the brim with potential, power enough to compel me, coerce me, to daydream about what it could be, what the developers and a series birthed from this game could become. The developers at Osaka Sai Games are passionate. Of that, I am certain, because I'm using the game as a measuring stick. The colossal volume of small touches and labors of love. It's the devotion that artisans exhibit toward their piece in production, their tenderness intending to their creation, so that they may smile the small smile of pride when they gaze and reflect upon their finished work. There are so many points I feel I must praise before I can prattle about the gameplay. For starters, I have to speak on the speaking. Chatter sprouts from this game's every crevice. The hub areas of this game roar with the vigor of a myriad merchants hustling and bustling amongst the town's residents. Party members are constantly commenting on each other's prowess during combat, with unique dialogue specific to each pairing. Unlockable characters even have story quest specific dialogue, despite the fact that many players will never hear it. There's a constant, often chaotic cacophony of communication coursing through your ears as you play this game. It's lovely, it's lively, it's life. And the game has all this chirping in both English and Japanese dub. Okay, you got me. I play in Japanese dub when I don't understand Japanese very well at all. Much of the villagers and merchants' environmental shouting in the hub areas don't have subtitles, and same goes for a lot of the quipping during combat. But those words falling upon my ununderstanding ears doesn't negate their value. Just mitigates it a little bit, but the point is the sound. The voice's melody. It's the song of birds filtering through the forest tree leaves. I don't need to speak bird to enjoy that warmth. Then there are the designs. I like them. You can play as Big Man or Big Man. Nobody really picks this one, or Pretty Man, or Pretty Lady, or Lively Lady, or Lively Girl, or John Granblue, or Jane Granblue, or more, or more, or more. You're interested in playing someone here, especially if you're used to anime designs. And even if you're not, there's still Vasaraga and Siegfried. There's so much to be said about the characters, including their unique flourishes on the core combat mechanics, but I'll get to that later in the video, because I still need to hit a bunch of the random acts of love that this game has before I can talk about the gameplay. Such as, the music is cool, the background animations that you can barely see but exist anyway are cool, the world is cool, floating islands upon a boundless sky is an awesome concept, changing the color and even the appearance in some cases of your character is cool, seeing unlocked crewmates just hanging out around town is cool, all the writing in Lyria's journal to flesh out the characters is cool, all the writing in the character-specific Fate episodes is cool, free post-game support including 3 new free characters and several quests which extended post-game progression into a true final super boss is cool. The game, it's cool. Even without discussing the combat, Granblue Fantasy Relink is very impressive. I cannot stress that enough. But okay, I've stressed that enough. It's time to talk about the gameplay of the game I played. The action combat is excellent. There's a delightful amount of variety represented by the different characters. Captain throwing out strong arts, Io nuking, Gandagoza nuking, Narmaya virgiling, keeping it stylish, Vasaraga tanking and smashing, Lancelot swanging and giving you RSI, Charlotta Beyblading, Rackham rhythm heavening and self-destructing.
Oh, you're invincible.
There's ample room to express your individual tastes with the characters, not just visually, but functionally as well. And all this is layered on top of the solid core universal mechanics. Perfect dodging feels fantastic, and perfect guarding feels divine. The in-game content pushes you to learn enemy tells, timings, and mechanics. Sometimes this means watching the red circle on the floor light up. Other times this means overcoming the 12 labors. Mechanics like chain burst and link time allow for astonishing amounts of DPS if you learn how to utilize them effectively. And every character has several arts that you can mix and match, allowing for individuality amongst players of the same character. And that ties into how you build your character, the RPG part of action RPG. There are so many axes of progression represented by this game. You've got level ups and fate episodes and curios and trophies with rewards and masteries and randomized over masteries and weapons and weapon collection masteries and sigils and sigils and sigils. Sigils are so important. They are the cores of your build. Your DPS and survivability live and die by the sigils you select. There are a lot of options here to get creative with. Of course, endgame optimization tends to choke the life out of that creativity, especially with how damage caps work, but that's how optimizing goes in every game, pretty much. Sigils also represent a massive portion of the grind of endgame, the proud difficulty quests which lie far beyond the end of the main story. I'm not gonna get into transmutation and sigil synthesis, which are systems which could use refining in their own right, but basically, acquiring the best sigils requires a lot of time and a lot of luck. The strongest sigils require resources from the strongest bosses. It takes 4 level ups to max out a legendary rank sigil, so 4 batches of resources. You have 12 sigil slots. That's a lot of farming. And if you want your AI companions to be strong, you're gonna have to do a lot of farming. Each individual sigil can only be equipped to one character at a time after all. The online community has been pretty cool in my experience, but if they're all gone, or if you don't have online access, or whatever reason you might have to not play multiplayer, could just be preference, if you're gonna be doing the in-game content with AI, those AI are gonna need to be decked out. Because the in-game content is no joke. It's tough. It's overall satisfying, but it can be frustrating. The multi-monster quests particularly are agony. Getting blindsided and blasted from off-screen is no fun, and the bots are not very good at dodging multiple overdrive bosses, not to mention the DPS checks. The bots have no clue how to play their characters well, so they have to be geared up far more than a human would be on a quest, especially if the boss does a DPS check. It's insanely demanding. I get that proud difficulty is meant to be difficult. Don't get me wrong, I like it that way. But no one can deny that it's frustrating trying to shepherd these dumbass ducklet bots to victory, especially when it's your first time going through the content. The game really encourages multiplayer, which is fine, just don't punish solo players. What is late to the show Joe gonna do 3 years from now when there's no one left to play with? Clear Lucilius Zero with bots? Ha! Ha 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 ha. That boy's gonna have a lot of hours of playtime if he's gonna want to complete the endgame quests, I'll tell you that much. The endgame also stretches the grinding formula to its very limit. Toward the very end of your progression arc for a character, you'll be grinding the same 2 or 3 bosses over and over and over. Repeat quest, repeat quest, repeat quest, back to back to back. You want a terminus weapon, which basically doubles your DPS output? Kill this boss watching its mid-fight cutscenes every time for a 20% chance of unlocking a terminus weapon for a random character that you have unlocked. This grind can take forever with no sort of pity system implemented and practically no sense of variation between attempts. You unlucky? Too bad, keep farming. I'm not a stranger to these kinds of games, but the grind aspect needs to be worked on. I'm not saying that grinding is bad or boring in general. I think it just needs to be refined, especially at the endgame stage of this game. Let us skip or at least fast forward the boss cutscene. How many times must I see Behemoth's soul evaporate from its body, and then its body evaporate from existence? Yes, Piet's tail goes crazy, I know. Not to mention bloodthirst phases and other segments of the fight like it, where you basically just cannot damage the boss. You can still interact with the boss defensively, but I think it'd be best if you could also interact with them offensively as much as possible. But despite all this, I still had a ton of fun with the endgame. Lucilius is a fun fight. Almost all of these solo bosses are fun fights. Well, not when you do them a dozen times in a row, but you get it. Optimizing my builds to the pinnacle of power is fun. Farming the bosses with different characters and players is fun. Playing the game is fun. It just needs refinement. I also think there's a lot of untapped potential from the characters of Granblue. They all not only represent such cool and diverse gameplay, but they also represent such strong personalities. They're not just weapons, they're characters, and I think Cygames would do well to capitalize upon that, to lean upon that. You could still have an overarching save the world main story, but the arcs, the development of the plot, should be centered around all the characters included in the game, not just the 6 you start out with. And really, it's more like 2 that are actually important to the plot. There could be a Siegfried and Lancelot arc, an Io and Rosetta arc, a Sandalphon arc, etc. They kinda did this, like how Piet's quest has a few lines of dialogue from Zeta and Vasaraga, but they could do so much more. I know the Granblue mobile game has crossfates, which are basically what I just spoke of. Do that here. Do it bigger. Make all of the crew into the main story. Don't just relegate so much of the depths of their existence to the optional Fate episodes. Also, let me do the main story online with my friends, please. Not really related to the point that I was making, but I had to mention it. When you look at the core gameplay structure of this game, going out on co-op quests to defeat enemies and farm resources to make your character stronger, it's reasonable to be reminded of Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter enjoys the success and popularity that it does now, riding upon the back of almost 2 decades of iteration. If Cygames were to invest the same amount into Granblue Fantasy Relink's formula via sequels, we could see some amazing things. More characters, more monsters, co-op story please, longer post-launch support, and maybe even paid expansions, like Monster Hunter World's Iceborne DLC or Monster Hunter Rise's Sunbreak DLC. Just keep applying feedback, keep developing, keep investing in this formula. Refine the grind, apply their minds, and in due time we could see something sublime. Osaka Cygames has my full attention now, especially for this genre of games. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Granblue Fantasy Relink. I have such a positive impression of it. I liked it enough to get every achievement, unlocking the Platinum achievement. Like the Steam achievements though, not the in-game trophies. That would be insane. I also even did a true solo run of Lucilius, no AI, just for the love of the game. I love what this game is, but I can't help but be captivated by what this game could become. A phenomenal game series, with each iteration accumulating a cult following of die-hard devotees. Granblue Fantasy Relink has been planted, this seed buried snugly into the soil. Will Cygames have the fate, skill, and desire required to properly tend to it? I hope so. I hope that Granblue Fantasy Relink is allowed to sprout someday.